When you eat these oils, these oxidized oils, they enter into your body, they're absorbed into your blood, they actually pass through the blood-brain barrier, and they drive inflammation in your body.
Seed oils are the single most processed food on the planet, bar none.
Cottonseed oil had originally been used as a lubricant for machinery in the Industrial Revolution. After we had hunted all the whales out of the ocean, we hunted the whales mainly for their fat. When we lost that source of fat, it had to be replaced. Cottonseed oil came in to fill that need for all kinds of machinery, for making candles and soaps, and that was it. Then Procter & Gamble came along and said, let's try to sell this as a foodstuff. So in 1911, they sold it as an ersatz, a fake lard, and they called it Crisco. Crisco was the first time anywhere in the history of the world that vegetable oils were marketed as a food item to be consumed by humans.
Butter and lard and even tallow began to be replaced and supplanted. And this is what took off in the 20th century.
In the 1920s, 30s, 40s, the American Heart Association was a sleepy little organization because cardiologists were relatively rare, as heart disease was relatively rare back then. And then in 1948, in comes Procter & Gamble.
And they literally infused $1.7 million into the American Heart Association, which was this little tiny organization. $1.7 million is the equivalent of $20 million today. So the American Heart Association became a huge organization overnight.
Before Procter & Gamble stepped in, it's really clear that the American Heart Association is struggling as an organization that doesn't have much power or many funds. So this is a chapter, starts from 1946. There is little doubt that the cardiologists, the scientists, and local groups involved with the American Heart Association were extremely frustrated. Their inability to deal with disease, but also their inability to get anybody's attention. The president of the AHA was presented a check by representatives of Procter & Gamble. Suddenly, the coffers were filled. American housewives had shifted over to seed oils because they were cheaper. Margarine was cheaper than butter. Seed oils were cheaper than any kind of animal fat for cooking. There was an economic incentive, but now there was a medical incentive. In 1955, President Eisenhower had a heart attack. The attention of the nation was 100% focused on President Eisenhower and what caused heart disease. Nobody knew. The public was desperate for answers. Here was the #1 killer of the nation, felling men in the prime of life, and really, people had no idea about how to protect themselves. So into this vacuum steps Ancel Keys. Ancel Keys believed that saturated fat and cholesterol caused heart disease because they would raise your blood cholesterol, and like hot oil down a cold stovepipe would gradually shrink your arteries until you had a heart attack. That was called the diet heart hypothesis. Ancel Keys got onto the Nutrition Committee of the American Heart Association in 1960, and in 1961, 1 year later, even though there was no additional new science, the American Heart Association endorsed his view and adopted Ancel Keys's hypothesis.
From the beginning of the production, sale, distribution of vegetable oils, it was never about health. It was always about profit.